Now, I have finished the material that I'm going to do with you this term, and as many of you haven't had a discussion on the classroom, so it will be a repeat for some of you who were here at the beginning of last term, but I don't think it'll hurt you to hear it again. And then on Thursday, I thought I would discuss how we start a class if we are beginning with an entirely new group of children. All right? Well, now the classroom itself, before one thinks of the classroom for the children today, you have to realize that one of Dr. Montessori's, her first effort in the realm of ordinary education was as a doctor, when she realized that her children who were perfectly healthy on entering school came to her in a year, 2 years, 3 years, with signs of curvature of the spine, anemia, lassitude, a sort of depression, and very often the first signs of tuberculosis. And tuberculosis was very rife among adolescents. And when she talked about this, everyone said to her, well, this is common. All children are like this. They all have these symptoms at certain ages. And people just accepted it as a universal fact. And she said, no, it can't be right. Nature never meant children to be anything but healthy, so something must be wrong. And she went to look at the schools. And the schools in those days held many more children than they do today, but they had long benches on which the children sat that were just a plank about as wide as this, a long plank of wood with a long desk in front, and they all sat pushed together on this plank, and the whole thing was screwed to the floor so that you couldn't move it. You couldn't adjust the distance between the seat and the desk to make it more comfortable for you. You couldn't, many of the children, their feet didn't touch the floor, and the tall ones, it wasn't the right size for them either. Then the walls were painted a dark green up to just about the height of this blackboard, and then a sort of yellowish color. And the idea was that dirty marks would not show. Well, you know, if dirty marks don't show, the wall doesn't get washed either. And so these schools were very seldom washed. And then the windows were blacked out, because much taller windows, because rooms were higher in those days. And the windows were blacked out halfway up, painted black, so the children couldn't possibly be distracted by seeing through the window. And there was nothing in the room to distract the children's attention. There was only a blackboard and a teacher. In some schools there was also a map and letters of the alphabet, not in all. And Dr. Montessori was then a good teacher, was the teacher who could keep her children without speaking and without moving. And the children used to have to practice this, practice sitting absolutely still, and of course nobody was allowed to speak. And then the teacher always had a cane on her table or in her desk. It varied with the teacher as to how much it was used, or if it was used at all. And it was in the German schools that this punishment was absolutely terrific. But it was far less so in Italy or England. But it's all the same, it was there. So her first campaign was just for the physical conditions of the school. As a doctor, she was insistent that the furniture must fit the child. And she was always very thorough in everything she did. So she took measurements of the children at different ages and worked out the proportions, call them the correct proportions. If you notice a child of 2 and 3, that child has very short legs, very wide seat. And actually the chest measurement at 4 is not very much greater than the chest measurement of a year of age, you see. In fact, in England, during the war, when you simply could not get materials and clothes, a little girl of 4 often wore her baby dress as a blouse. She had grown in height, but her chest measurement was about the same. And it made you realize how the children didn't alter in some respects. So those children need a very wide seat and proportionately short legs. It isn't any good just looking at a grown-up chair and making it a size or 2 smaller, you see. So she took the measurements of the children onwards and worked out the sizes for the furniture that would best suit them. And then she said that the room must be clean and hygienic, and that therefore the walls should be painted a pale color so that dirt would show up. And then if the walls looked dirty, they would get washed. See? And then again, she said that you must unblack the windows because the sunshine, the light and the air cannot get through. And it's very necessary for children to have light and air on their skin and so on, or you will get anemic. I'm always saying how we're overdressing the children today, especially putting little boys into these long, tight pants, because the sun never gets to their skin, see, so they don't make a gastral and get immunity to colds and things as they should do. She did also attack the clothing and insisted on the children having light, loose clothing, the mothers dressing them with far lighter clothes, fewer clothes, and clothes the children could manage for themselves. Children were overdressed then as they are now. We had a period in between when the clothes were lighter and looser. Well, she attacked the fact that the children had to sit still for so many hours. And every now and then during the day, they might have a 5 or 10 minute break when they would do exercises under the command of the teacher. They would sit and do finger exercises, moving one finger at a time. But everybody had to move the finger at the same time. So it wasn't really much relief. And then there was a sort of Swedish gymnastics they all did, but they all had to stand and do it at the same time. Probably a morning break and an afternoon break. But that was the only relief from this sitting still, and a time in the playground during the morning, about 20 minutes. And that was the only relief from this sitting still and keeping silent. And they worked at the command of the teacher. You had a writing lesson. The minute that was over, you had another lesson. The minute that was over, another lesson. Usually there was a bell which told you the time for the lesson was up. She insisted that children would only be healthy if they had freedom of movement. She always insisted that movement also helped the development of the intelligence, besides being physically healthy. Well, this was so revolutionary, the idea of the furniture, a different type of classroom, that she was bitterly criticized by the teachers just for this. But gradually, this reform did creep into most of the schools in Europe, certainly in England, and here you wouldn't dream of seeing a school under those old conditions. I certainly never saw one when I was growing up, and so when she used to describe it, I only half believed what I thought she was, exaggerating. But when I was giving courses in Germany after the war, as part of the rehabilitation of Germany, I saw schools exactly like that. Every school I went into was like that. These children in rows, and they had to do what they were told the instant they were told to do it. And there was nothing at all but the blackboard and the teacher. I went into one school, and it was a habit to ask the children to sing for you, and Germans do sing very beautifully. And all the children were writing. And the teacher said, "You're going to sing for the visitors when they name the song, 1, 2, 3, put your pens down, 1, 2, 3, and we'll start. And one child was writing with such concentration that he didn't even notice the singing. He went on writing. And the headmaster who was with us went down and rapped on his desk and scolded him. And I'm sure if we hadn't been there, would have boxed his ears too. You know, he got really into trouble. In another class, one little boy turned and looked at us. Well, you know, here we were, visitors from another country. That was not allowed either. He had to keep his eyes on his work. So it really is difficult to visualize. Her first reform was just a reform of the building itself. Much that you expect a Montessori school to be, you will rarely see her ideas have been adopted in practically all the schools. You don't really go into schools now without seeing a certain freedom of movement, and the children very often busy at different tasks. See, they don't, perhaps with the older children, you can sit and listen to a teacher, but the younger ones, on the whole, are working individually, I think, here, aren't they? Well, next she said that the work must be within reach of the children, and she advised these low shelves where the children, everything in the room was reachable by the children, and the teacher had her stock cupboard outside the schoolroom. She wanted a hygienic environment, and also, when we are thinking of a classroom, it must be a safe environment. Safety has to come first, and then, of course, the hygiene. I think you can make a Montessori classroom out of any environment. I've seen the most unlikely places turn into a good classroom. But, of course, if you were building a school, especially, then I think a large rectangular room is as easy as anything. But you would have windows at the that were low so that the children could look out of the windows. You would have windows on both sides of the room if possible, so that you got light from both sides. It isn't good for children to work in electric light all day. It's much better to be lit by daylight and not have these neon lights all the time. So you would see the room was well lit. And then you would have a sink with water. You see, you need this when the children are going to paint or wash a table, for many things. So you would have a sink with the water in the room. If they were small children, then the bathroom and cloakroom must be very near the schoolroom, because the teacher often has to go, or an aide has to go and help a child, or the children do, especially little boys, wait till the last minute, and then they have to get there quickly. Yeah? It's true, isn't it? For a long time. That's why these tight trousers are impossible. There's not time to undo them. If you have very little children, little boys that don't yet stand up, then there is a particular type of potty with a front which is made for little boys. You see, and you should have one of those as well as the other kind. The bathroom itself, we now have the small lavatories, don't we, and low wash basins, and the hooks for their towels must all be within reach of the children. In England, every child brings a clean towel on Monday and has a little brush and comb in a bag and a face flannel, and he has to pay for that because they have to use their own separate towels and wash flannels. They have their own brush and comb. I don't know what to do here. It's very hard to get a child's hands dry with paper towels. Then on a Friday, the mothers take these home to wash. It's quite a good habit. I also found that I always had to have one adult lavatory. And I had a pair of wooden steps made so they could have their feet on the steps. Because children who are used to their own homes don't see the little lavatories in their own homes. And I've had many children who are afraid to use them, and many children who would refuse to use them. So I think you have to be prepared to let them use an adult one, if they feel like that. Others love them, you know. But you do have a sort of need to see what you have in your own home, because that is what you are used to. Well, now then, the furniture will all be the right size for the children. And I think the best kind of flooring is a vinyl flooring like this one, which is washable. The carpets, I know, are washable, but you cannot wash the carpets every day as you can wash this type of floor. And if things are like paint gets spilt on the carpets or plasticine gets trodden into a carpet, it's very hard to get clay off a carpet. See, but off this type of floor you can clean up very much more easily. You could have a small carpeted area as a book corner where they could sit on the floor. But on the whole, I think this type of floor works very well. It doesn't have to be this dead color. You know, it can be a little bit more pleasant, not too bright. Now then, any materials that are used, the materials must be within reach of the children. The classroom really belongs to the children. They want to feel it belongs to everybody. You must always talk about the schoolroom as though it belonged to everybody, and not as though it was your possession or the school's possession. And so the children, any motives of activity you have, then the children can reach them. And the different motives of activity are kept in different areas so that the children know just where to find them. Anything for practical life, for keeping the room clean, would be kept near the water area, you see. And here when we say a safe environment, you have to be quite sure that any cleaning fluids you leave within the reach of the children are safe ones. You always look on the container to see if it says otherwise. The brasser that we use for brass polishing, that is not safe. If children drank it, it says so, and it must. So that you keep in a stock cupboard and only give them very little when they're going to clean the brass. Children will drink anything, you know. I had a little boy who, on his way past the house painters on his way into the schoolroom, they had a quart tin of brown house paint, you know, and he picked it up and drank it. He came in, brown paint dribbling all down his clothes, saying chocolatey, chocolatey. Oh. I didn't seem to know the difference. Oh, he was very tough. I think that he survived. But you know, we were already worried about him. Well, you mustn't have cupboards that the children can't open. I think just open shelves are the easiest for them to manage. The door handle should be low enough for a child to manage, so that he doesn't feel he can't get in and out of the room by himself. Ideally, the room would open onto the playground so that you can go in and out pretty easily. But as I say, you often have to make use of an imperfect surrounding, so only if you're building you can get everything you want. I think the teacher has to be responsible for the cleanliness of the classroom. No janitor ever really cleans properly, and you cannot have a janitor dusting or touching your shelves. See? So in England, a teacher really looks after her classroom, plus all the children doing things with her. And the children, when they come, they like to dust the shelves and do all these things. But naturally, little children need a certain amount of assistance from you, And in England it is sort of law, I think still, that a teacher does 2 hours of work for her classroom out of school hours. That is why they have such short hours of work. You have very short hours of work in comparison with the rest of the working population, don't you? And so it's necessary to do some work to prepare for your classroom if you're going to have a successful class at any age. With the little ones, you do have to do some clearing up of the room, preparing handwork materials, so on. With the older children, you have a lot of preparing of more intellectual lessons and more intellectual materials. See? And when they're older again, you have all that horrible correcting of work. See? And then you get very long holidays. And those were holidays were really not arranged for the sake of the children or the teacher. They were arranged for the needs of agriculture. At certain stages of the year, the farming population could not do without the help of the older children. So in England, we get different holidays. In the area where they grow potatoes, they still get a week's holiday, and the potatoes have to be dug, because the children used to pick them up and put them in the sacks. Nowadays, of course, the machine does it, but the holiday is still there. Because, you know, you always have a time lag. Scottish holidays are different to English holidays because their crops ripen at a different time and so on. So although the children don't really work in agriculture as they used to at these special times, the holidays are very long and are still geared to that. It would be much better if we didn't have such long holidays. Children could be taken out of school when the parents needed to go on holiday, but if the schools ran all the year round. Especially for the little children. See, they're better not having those long holidays. Now, the room, Dr. Montessori was very insistent that everything you gave the children was of the very best quality. See, there's a habit of thinking of children as though they were not of any importance and that anything cheap and rubbishy would do for them. In fact, it's quite horrifying how the law does not protect children. You will have a child who gets killed by his parents and the punishment is almost nothing, as if that adult had killed another adult. It would have been life imprisonment. In fact, we had a case of a mother who was always hitting her little girl and at last did strike her so hard that she did kill the child. And she didn't, she had no punishment at all. The judge said, oh, well, I think she's had enough, and nothing was done. You see. And I think we do need a deterrent, and we need to start thinking more about the rights of children or enforcing their rights. But in any case, we have got that sort of attitude because they're not yet wage earners, that they are of small importance. And Dr. Montessori did insist that they be given the best quality, and everything they had, and also beautiful materials. And if there are any pictures on the walls, you must not put up these rubbishy posters. You have a beautiful poster of an animal, there's some lovely ones today, but not just ugly pictures that are sort of roughly coloured, badly drawn, that are being given to the children. I think you need one picture or two pictures with a reproduction of one of the great masters. And you can get these pictures of a uniform size at museums and art galleries. Quite good reproductions. They're not expensive, but the ones done by the art galleries themselves are the best. And you can have one or two, and the picture is hung at approximately eye level or a little bit higher, so the child can really look at it. It's not hung at the height of the grown-up's eyes. And the teacher should tell the children about the picture, who painted it, and when, anything interesting about the life of the artist. See? So the children begin to enjoy good pictures. I think children seem to be particularly fond of the Italian ones. There's so much to look at, and there's a sort of sentiment that suits the children. So we have to pick what they were really like. You can vary the picture from time to time. You can have a back of the frame that unscrews and you put a new picture in, but you must always tell the children when you're going to replace the picture, because they don't like to come into a classroom which they know very well and find something has been changed when they haven't expected it. Well, now after that, you must not clutter up the room with masses of pictures. Most schoolrooms you go into have a very restless feeling. It's difficult to settle to work in them because there is so much clutter. You see, the teachers seem to feel they have to cover every inch of the room with something bright. And this does give for this restlessness, and I don't think you feel peaceful in a room like that. And in many of the schools, they have the habit of mounting the pictures at all sorts of funny angles. So there's a, what you call it, board, and all the pictures are put on a bit skew-wise. And that again, you can't really look at the picture because it's at a funny slant, and it makes you feel restless. See? Then again, you mustn't have an over-bright room. If everything in the room is very highly colored, color is very strong, it hits you all the time. Again, you can't feel peaceful, you can't get down to grips with work if they are surrounded by all these brilliant colors which are distracting your attention. Remember, one of the things we said about our materials, that they were only what you were trying to study showed up. If you were studying size, then it was plain wood, you eliminated color. Now, the Montessori firms don't understand this. They are making them materials, of course, for profit, and they are making everything much too highly colored and selling it in red and green and blue boxes. You see, so you have to watch and get this stopped. You want beautiful colors, but we have an idea that you have to have these sort of violent reds and blues and oranges for children. Nearly all their toys are in these over-strong colors nowadays. They didn't used to be. So any colors must be beautiful too. I think where the biggest difference perhaps between a Montessori classroom and the ordinary school, which has adopted so many of our ideas, see, is this lack of clutter. And so you go in, and the lack of all this strong color, so you go in, you feel it's a peaceful room at once. See? And the children are peaceful. It doesn't mean they're silent. The children are talking and moving freely, but they're not screaming and yelling. See, which is quite different. And then the other big difference is the materials that are put into the room. See, the Montessori materials, everything that we put in has a definite function and is definitely made to suit the age of the children in the room. See, and they are always work materials. See, materials that have been designed to develop the intelligence, to develop the potential of the child, and develop the potential of the age of the children using the room. So it's been very carefully worked out for the right age. So that if it was a class of children under 5, you would have all the sense training materials, you would have the practical life materials, brooms and the dustpan, so on. And you would have the beginning of the reading and the math work. And if it was children from 6 onwards, then it would be materials for arithmetic and reading and grammar more materials for nature, geography, and so on. But the materials are for the intellectual development of the children. See? And every material is chosen for a purpose, and there's not a repetition. It's not, you don't get just masses of material that are leading you nowhere. That, I think, is the real difference. And I think the British Infant School has adopted all her ideas about the environment, except for the clutter. But the materials that they use are practically all materials that are not leading to intellectual development. This is endless playing with plasticine or making a noise by banging things, or powder painting, cutting out, not very much intellectual. So that is a big difference. And we think that the young child needs all these cultural things, because that is at the young age when they form their ability to appreciate beautiful things. See, so we must give them the very best things that are produced by our society. And then they do grow up appreciating these beautiful things. Now, it does seem to be a sort of status symbol nowadays to keep animals in the classroom. And the more exotic the creature, the sort of greater the status. And all sorts of things are being kept, which are interesting and so on, but are not particularly attractive to the children, and are very often ones that they can't handle and touch. Now, and you don't need to have a vast quantity of animals. I do think children have a great affinity to animals. And if you are a person who likes animals, then do keep one or perhaps two with the children. But they rather like those little furry animals, that you can hold and touch and be really fond of. A hamster is ideal. You know a hamster? Because that doesn't have this, it has cheek pouches, and it stuffs its cheek pouches full of food, and it goes away and stores the food and comes back for more. And that's very nice, because children do like to feed an animal over and over again, and you can feed all your apple cores and bits of biscuit. It's a vegetarian, it will take everything, so that's nice. But then, of course, in the evening you have to clear out all that, because it does store too much. A snake is nice if it's one that you can handle. No, snake is perfectly dry. People seem to think it's slimy. If you don't like them, then you can't keep one. But you must not keep one that requires live food. To me, it's simply horrifying that I've found that schools do breed little mice, which are so lovely and attractive, and then expect the children to see the feds that's a snake fed on the mice. Now, in nature, a snake naturally, many snakes do eat live creatures like this, but you see, they do catch the weakest, you see, and it's a way of keeping, the best for reproduction and life. But we don't have to watch it. It would be very wrong to let children watch anything like that, or even to know that you bred the mice in order to feed the snake. It's really a dreadful thing to do. It's very easy to train young children towards sadism or enjoying that sort of thing. And anyone who lived through the 1930s, as I did, and was mixing with students of Europe, knows how people like Hitler managed to train a race, highly civilized people, to do the things they did. You see, it was starting with the small children. So we do have to be very, very careful what we do with the little children. We can accept it happens in nature, you see, but we don't watch it and we don't do it ourselves. Occasionally, these nature films are spoiled. We had a wonderful film on the creatures that live in the desert. And unfortunately, for a bit of the film, there was a locust or something eating a locust. And with the sound, and you could hear this thing being champed up. And I had to go out of the room. But some of my children had watched this film, and it took them weeks to get over this. They were so upset by it. So one does have to realize how sensitive they are. So, and if you keep too many animals, you see, they don't really get loved and looked after. It's the minimum. Now, the teacher does have to see that the animal has ideal conditions. The animal has a right to a good life, just as we do. You cannot keep an animal in too small a cage. They need room. See, if the rabbit, it needs a run on the grass. You know, you can make a run so she's movable so that it can really have some room to hop about. And the teacher does have to see that the children understand the care of the animal, and that in the beginning, when you get children who don't understand animals, that the animal does not get hurt. They are inclined to poke at it, you know, until they have been shown the right way to handle it and pick it up and care for it. Yeah. See? So the animal at first is locked. They can't open the cage, and it has a safe place at the back that they can retreat to if the children, you have a child who doesn't know how to look after them. After the war, we had some children who could not be left with little children because they would hurt anybody, and they certainly couldn't be left near an animal. See? And so for the first animal we found we could keep as a tortoise, because if they did anything to the tortoise, it could retreat into its shell. And of course they didn't like that because they liked to see it walking around. And that was its most successful. And then from there on we were able to get a cat and kittens. I don't think the cat should not be brought into the classroom until the kittens are at the stage where she doesn't mind. They don't have to. So the cat always is a wonderful mother. She always has her kittens in a dark place away from everybody else, and she has to be respected. So as kittens are, you might show them a baby kitten just for a very brief moment, but they certainly can't be in the classroom until the right time. The best pet I ever had was the baby duck. I think I told you, because that would follow me everywhere. If I had follows the mother. And we did certainly have to keep a mop handy, because you can't house train a duck. But it was the most loving little creature. And if I had to go anywhere else, I would always put it by somebody else's feet, and it would sit on that child's feet till I came back. And it was most attractive. And it would follow us round in the garden. And as it always stayed with you, it would have all this freedom of movement. I don't like birds in cages myself. I think birds were meant to fly, but I've got some idiosyncrasies. I did have somebody write and say to me, you have one of each type of animal in the classroom. I think that's going a bit far. You know, I think one pet, or perhaps two, is really enough. And any biology we do, we have to be very careful not to do anything that involves killing or hurting. It's all the way through the school, I think. And we must teach them this respect for nature, you know, that you look and you don't touch. Those tiny creatures are very easily hurt. But they can have a magnifying glass and they can look at them, and you can grow flowers in the classroom or have flowers for the children to arrange. Now the playground, It's part of the classroom. Don't fill it so full of equipment there's no room for the children to run about. I think that's a tendency today. You do need a climbing frame. Children really need to climb. If there are trees that they can climb, all the better. And never stop a child from climbing a tree. Don't put them into the tree, don't help them climb. But if they can climb, then they're safe. I've never known one fall out of a tree if they could get into it by themselves. Another thing you need is a balancing bar. This is a plank turned on its side, so they have about a 2-inch bar, about 6 inches from the ground. It can be on a little stand because they have this need to balance, and they like to walk slowly along, one foot in front of the other. And it can be used indoors in wet weather. Taken out. I don't myself like a swing, unless it's got a fence round it, because children wander in front of the swing and they can get very badly hurt because the child who is swinging can't stop, and they seem to wander in front and behind the swing without realizing, what can happen to them. So you don't have a swing unless you can fence it in. On the whole, a junk playground is the best. If you have junk, J-U-N-K, you have an old table. The children will do all sorts of things with it. They can throw it right over it and get underneath it and be in the dark, or they can turn it upside down and pretend it's a ship. They can do anything they like with it. We had some big deep freezers delivered at school just before I came here. Those great big cardboard boxes, and the children had a wonderful time with those. They used them as tunnels, they got into them as boxes, they did all sorts of things, and then they fell to pieces and could be thrown away until you found something else. Once I had a lot of just planks the fence was taken down, these long planks, and they were always dragging those about. Any age child used those. A 3-year-old would drag them, quite heavy for him, and they would pile them all in a corner of the playground. If you said to them, "What are you making?" they would look at you for a few minutes, and then they would make up something just to please you, They would say an airplane or a ship, but obviously they were not really doing that. They were just enjoying the exercise of dragging these heavy things about. And when they got them all collected in one place, they would drag them off somewhere else. It was very good exercise. A sand pit is nice. They enjoy a sand pit if it's out in the open air where it gets rained on. Then a certain amount of movable things according to their age, balls that they can throw and bounce and catch and kick, or bean bags. Skipping rope or two. Skipping is a very nice exercise. And you can show them how to throw and catch a ball, or how to bounce and catch it. Or if you have a man on the staff, how to do all those tricky things with football, But you never have team games. They're not ready. They get into this competitive mood much too soon, and then the games are not ready for enjoyment and exercise. Something else that is really harmful creeps in. And they do not become as skilled. They become far more skilled when they are just throwing a ball with a friend, kicking it about with 2 or 3 other friends. See, because you're getting exercise all the time. They do need to gain this eye-hand coordination, throwing and bouncing and catching. But it's never as a team. It's these free groups that arrange it between themselves. But you're prepared to show them how to do things, show them how to skip and all the rest of it, and then leave them free to take what they like. I think part of the playground ought to be a garden. See, because children do love to grow things and look after the plants. You can have some permanent things. Nice if you have a fruit tree. See, when I was at Mrs. Justice's school in Washington the first time, the apples were just right, and one group had gone out and picked apples. They were having a lovely time climbing the trees and picking the apples, and then they came back into the classroom and made toffee apples. And you can't be too fussy. Everybody was licking everybody else's apple. You can't try and be hygienic with children. But they were having a lovely time. So if you can grow anything with them, that is very good. So, and if you can't grow things like an apple tree, well, you can grow smaller things that grow quickly, like radishes or mustard and cress. Grow mustard and cress indoors, or lettuce. When I say, what would you like to ask about the school?
What do you think about having tricycles or little cars and wagons?
I think on the whole they have plenty at home. And they're sort of solitary exercises. You know, when they drag all these planks about, they're probably working with 2 or 3 other children. It seems to me they have more fun. I don't know how good that exercise is. It seems to me they're always so stooped over. You know, I think they get enough of the tricycles at home. You can have one if you want one. I'm not saying you can't, but...
You mentioned in the floor that you needed something washable because clay and paint might be spilled on it?
Yes.
So you do provide occasional times where they can work with paint clay?
Oh yes, of course we do. We haven't got to the end of the year yet.
People have told me that one reason why they didn't like Montessori is because they didn't do things like that.
Oh, people will tell you all sorts of things. You know. The very last thing I heard was somebody who said about me, don't have Montessori. Whatever you do, that's communism. So you'll hear everything attached to it. It's extraordinary. You see,
You perhaps don't do it as much as...
The ignorance of these, and I think myself, the Montessori movement is partly responsible because there are some people, Montessorians, who have the idea that you have to have this silent classroom. You see, whereas if you read her, she talks about different forms of handwriting, but she didn't include it in her course because she said everybody's doing that. In fact, they're doing too much, and I don't need to teach it. We'll have a talk on it one day next time, the sort of things that we would do.
I have another question. What do you think?
But I wouldn't have it available, really. Those things I do as a group lesson. I don't think you can have children helping themselves to paint and using it all the time. You find in no time you get paint on everything. I go into some Montessori schoolrooms and everything is covered with this paint because they need a little supervision and also a little teaching. So it's not just putting paint on paper. It is overdone today. Yes.
I wanted to ask about compartmented. For instance, if you took a house to change into a school, is that possible where there are several classrooms that are not observable from a central position?
Well,
Have
it
you ever
depends.
seen it?
I think if you can't have children in a room by themselves without an adult, but you can cut a big archway. We've made a most attractive schoolroom out of the old kitchens at our college. The old kitchens, because it was an enormous room, the kitchen was then, it was tiled in white, which was only white tiles, and they were very new when the new idea when the house was built, which was not particularly attractive, but you didn't want to retile the room. And there were these long old-fashioned coal ranges, which we had to take out. I was rather fond of those. And then there was a room here, which I think housed all the china and things. And we cut a big square arch, see, so that became part of the schoolroom. And the children we made it into the book area, and the teacher could see every child, and they were very nice low windows that look out onto a 4-acre garden, which is beautiful. And then there was a room here, which housed the coal for the rangers. And again, we cut a big arch, so that again makes a very nice little room on its own, but it's as though it was missing one wall. And then down here was the old scullery where the kitchen maid did all the washing up. So quite a big area. So we cut a big doorway into there instead of having a closed door. And we just lowered. One of the sinks is nearly the size of this table. You see, we just lowered the old Victorian sinks to their size. And there was a cupboard there, I think where all the saucepans were kept, and that's made a lovely practical light area. But it's got very good, it's got overhead lighting, and it's got these windows looking out into the garden. So the teacher can see all the areas at once. But you know, for groups of children can work very quietly. So, and then there was a passage, and at one side of the passage we have made the little cloakroom for the children. And there are 2 little areas each side where they can go out and play. And then that leads into another classroom where there were 2 rooms, the butlers and the cooks. And they both had water at the sink by the window. And we've removed the walls and made them into one room. The 2 rooms in the passage make one big room.
Do you have any rule of thumb of size that you need for numbers of children?
Well, the state will regulate that. There are state requirements which you must find out. That they will there have to be fire precautions of a certain kind. They will come and look, don't buy the building till you've had the inspection to see what they will say. They will give you so many children per cubic feet. So there's a space required, certain space required for each child. There's a certain number of wash basins required per child, per group, and so on. So all of those hygienic things are state regulations.
One following question. If you were to set up a school, do you have in mind a number of children that would be a good number, you know, that less than this would not be so effective, or more than this would be too much?
Yes, I find I think that now giving too many adults per child, and the children have no chance to work together, mutually help each other to get the adults. You see, I think there are too many adults per child.
But in general, if you're thinking of the under 5 age, would you say that 30 children would be too many, or about right,
Oh, well,
or does it matter?
Are you saying to one teacher?
Well, or
I think
to 2,
I
whatever.
think we say, in England, they say about it's 15 to 1. Or to 1.
On that
Or
line.
26 to and 1 adult plus an aide. I mean, but I think here you have a different regulation.
Do you want to keep a balance of ages? Like if you have from 2.5 to 5, if you have 15 2.5-year-olds and 5 5-year-olds, what do you
that
have?
you see, the more 2.5s require a lot more help. And I know you can have 2.5s to 5, but I've always found myself, I mean, everybody can arrange things as they like, that the 2.5s and the 3s do want a very petted, motherly environment. You know? And I always had them have their own room. This room I've just been describing, where it was for the children from 2, children living in flats do need to come to half day because they have no garden or anything. And they often come about 2 years of age. So 2 up to about 3.5, 3 3/4, according to development. They would be in that room. A very homely atmosphere. And then from that age to 5, they were in the next room. But because there was just this passage between the rooms, they could mix as they liked. If you had a brother in one room, he could go down and see. Or they could visit each other, and that was fine. Or you could even have the 2 doors open and they could visit each other. And they joined for some things, like singing or One of the girls played the banjo very well. Then I had an African student who brought the African drums in for someone who could play them, and then they joined. They brought that. So there was freedom of movement, but little children really like to stay with their own teacher. But if you're going to mix the ages, you can't have so many little ones. They require a lot more help. You can have many more 5-year-olds. But with us at 5, you do have to by law, put the children into a different classroom, because children go to school at 5. So you could have 5 to 7s, but you can't have 4 to 5s, 4 to 6s. Or not many inspectors look.
Earlier, when you were talking about having a junk table out in the playground.
Well, anything you like. I once had an old car, and another time I had an old boat.
Yeah. You were saying that the children would turn it over and pretend it was a ship. Isn't that a form of fantasy?
Well, that isn't this perpetual fantasy. I mean, they were really pushing it along with somebody in the middle. But I haven't said that they cannot ever fantasize. But I've said that they don't fantasize with all the teaching materials. And the more you give them real things, the less they fantasize.
Right.